There is a particular kind of tired that has nothing to do with effort. It shows up after a day where you did everything you were supposed to do and still feel like you owe someone more before you're allowed to stop. Rest gets treated like the thing you earn after the work is done, never the work itself. Somewhere along the way, stillness became a debt you had to justify. As if lying down with nothing left to give was a small failure, instead of exactly where the body meant for you to be. But the body has never agreed to that arrangement. It keeps a schedule of its own, one written into tissue and fluid and chemistry long before anyone told you rest had to be earned. And that schedule starts precisely when you stop insisting on being useful. Here is the part most people never hear. The busiest shift your body runs all day is the one that starts the moment you go still. Not slower, not paused. Busier, clearing, rebuilding, repairing, at a pace nothing in your waking hours comes close to matching. The very stillness that feels like doing nothing is the signal your body has been waiting for all day to finally begin its real work. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Tonight follows that shift from its very first minute. Where it begins, what it moves through, and what it quietly leaves you with by morning, long before you're aware any of it happened. Close your eyes and let your breath find its own slower rhythm. You're lying at the edge of a workshop that only opens once the lights of the day go out, one that has been waiting all along for exactly this stillness to begin its work. Let's follow it from the moment it opens. When you are doing nothing, how much work is your body actually doing? Tonight walks through the answer, one quiet system at a time. The fluid that washes through your brain like a tide that only rises after midnight, carrying away what the day left behind. The hormone that rebuilds tissue while you're too still to notice. The immune repairs that happen only in the dark, in the hours no one is watching. None of it waits for permission. None of it asks whether you've done enough today to deserve it. By the end, one truth stands clear, the same one your body has been quietly proving all along. While you rest, it runs its most important repair shift, not despite the stillness, but because of it. There is a particular moment just past the edge of falling asleep when your thoughts stop making sense to you. You rarely question it because some quiet part of you already trusts what is about to happen. Neuroscientists have a name for what starts in that moment, the glymphatic system switching on. It is a network of channels running alongside your blood vessels. But instead of carrying blood, it carries cerebrospinal fluid, washing through brain tissue like a tide moving in. This only opens once you're asleep, not resting with your eyes closed, but genuinely asleep. What feels like doing nothing is the exact signal your brain has been waiting for all day. It is the permission it needs to begin its most demanding shift. You have probably noticed that a bad night's sleep leaves your mind foggy in a way that coffee cannot fix, heavy, slow, like wading through your own thoughts. Researchers studying the glymphatic system found a direct physical reason for that fog. During the day, metabolic waste, the byproducts of every thought, every signal your neurons fire, builds up in the spaces between brain cells. At night, cerebrospinal fluid flows through those same spaces, collecting the debris and carrying it away through the brain's drainage channels toward the rest of the body. A brain skipping sleep is a brain still carrying yesterday's residue. The fog you feel after a rough night is not imagined. It is your brain, quite literally, still waiting to be rinsed clean. Sleep can feel less like stopping and more like being carried somewhere. The reason sits in a discovery made around 2012 to 2013. A neuroscientist named Macon Nedergaard led a research team at the University of Rochester. They identified this entire clearance system for the first time, naming it glymphatic for its resemblance to the lymphatic system used elsewhere in the body. Before her work, scientists assumed the brain simply had no dedicated waste removal network, relying instead on slow diffusion. Nedegard's team showed cerebrospinal fluid moving through brain tissue in organized, sleep-dependent pulses. What you experience as unconsciousness turned out to be one of the most physically active states your brain enters. There is a strange kind of trust required to fall asleep, a willingness to stop monitoring the world, if only for a few hours. It turns out your brain requires an equally literal kind of surrender to do its own maintenance. Nedegard's research demonstrated that cerebrospinal fluid could not adequately flow through brain tissue while the brain stayed awake. This held true no matter how still or relaxed the body appeared. The channels needed for fluid movement stay narrow during wakefulness. Only true sleep initiates the physical changes that widen them. This means the mental rest you feel is inseparable from a structural process. One waits for the other, and neither substitutes for it. On some level, you already know that lying still with your eyes shut is not the same as being asleep. Your body seems to know the difference even when your mind resists it. That instinct is backed by hard biology. Studies using 2-photon imaging on the brains of sleeping mice revealed something striking. The space between brain cells, called the interstitial space, expands by more than 60% during genuine sleep compared to wakefulness. This expanded space is what allows cerebrospinal fluid to move freely and reach areas it cannot access during the day. Rest without sleep leaves those spaces narrow and closed. The clearing you need is locked behind a door. Only real sleep can open. Most people describe deep sleep as a kind of emptiness, a place where nothing seems to be happening. The opposite is closer to the truth. Researchers observe that individual brain cells, called glial cells, physically shrink during deep non-REM sleep. They reduce their own volume to make room for fluid to pass between them. This shrinkage is not passive. It is an active, energy-requiring adjustment your brain performs specifically to enable clearance. Cells that spend the day tightly packed together, protecting and supporting neurons, pull back at night to open a channel. It is not stillness. It is your brain rearranging its own architecture, cell by cell, so that something necessary can move through. Think of the last time you felt truly clear-headed after a good night's sleep. Sharper, calmer, like something had been lifted. Part of what you were sensing was the departure of a specific protein, beta amyloid. This is one of the primary waste products the glymphatic system removes, a byproduct of normal neural activity that accumulates during waking hours as neurons fire and communicate. Left uncleared for long stretches, beta amyloid can clump together, and its buildup has been studied extensively in relation to cognitive decline. One night of healthy sleep does not undo years of accumulation, but it does its part, night after night, removing what the day left behind before it has the chance to gather. It can feel almost unfair that the brain, which works so hard to think and feel and notice all day, doesn't get any credit for what it does at night. But the clearance work happening while you sleep may be just as demanding as anything you do awake. Cerebrospinal fluid does not simply seep passively through brain tissue. It is driven along specific pathways that follow the brain's blood vessels, entering through channels around arteries and exiting through separate channels around veins. This directional flow requires the coordinated shrinking of glial cells and a fluid pressure gradient your brain manages continuously. None of it announces itself. There is no sensation of cleaning happening. And yet, by morning, something measurable has changed. Pull an all-nighter, and even simple decisions feel harder the next day. That is something more literal than tiredness. Researchers have found that even a single night of significant sleep deprivation reduces glymphatic clearance efficiency. Metabolic waste is allowed to linger longer in brain tissue than it normally would. The effect compounds. Missed clearance one night does not fully catch up the next, and chronic short sleep has been associated with elevated markers of the very proteins this system is meant to remove. Your brain is not simply tired after a missed night. It is behind on a task it needed hours of true sleep to complete, and the debt does not disappear on its own. There is comfort in learning that a task you thought required effort was actually happening on its own, the entire time you assumed you were doing nothing. That is the quiet reversal at the center of everything explored so far tonight. Sleep is not an absence of work, but a specific, scheduled form of it, one your body performs only when you finally stop insisting on being useful. The question of how much your body accomplishes while you rest is only beginning to answer itself, and what comes next follows the fluid itself, tracing exactly where it goes once it leaves the space between your brain cells. After a long, undisturbed sleep, you can feel strangely lighter, not just mentally clearer, but somehow less weighed down. That sensation lines up with where the cleared waste actually goes. Once cerebrospinal fluid collects metabolic debris from around your brain cells, it does not just sit there. It drains along the same channels that carried it in, exiting near large blood vessels at the base of the brain. From there, the fluid carrying that waste connects to the lymphatic vessels in your neck, the same drainage network your body uses to clear waste from muscles and organs. Your brain's nightly cleanup does not stay contained. It joins a system that runs through your entire body. Some nights of sleep leave you feeling far more refreshed than others, even when the hours were similar. The difference likely comes down to sleep quality rather than sleep quantity alone. Research on glymphatic function shows that clearance efficiency depends heavily on reaching and sustaining deep, slow-wave sleep, the stage where glial cells shrink the most and fluid movement peaks. Frequent waking, even briefly, can interrupt this process before it completes a full cycle. This is why 8 hours of fragmented sleep can feel less restorative than 7 hours of unbroken rest. The clearing your brain performs is not just about time spent asleep. It is about time spent undisturbed. There is a particular kind of relief in learning that something you cannot control is being handled anyway. Sleep position turns out to matter here in a way most people never consider. A study using MRI imaging on rodents found that lymphatic clearance was measurably more efficient when sleeping on one side compared to sleeping on the back or stomach. Researchers believe the side position may reduce pressure on certain drainage pathways, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow with less resistance. You were likely never told your sleep position could influence how well your brain clears itself overnight. And yet, for many people, the body seems to settle into that position without instruction long before the science explained why. Deep sleep seems to come in waves rather than a single steady state, dipping, lightening, dipping again. That rhythm is not incidental to glymphatic clearance. It may be essential to it. Slow wave sleep, the deepest non-REM stage, produces large, synchronized waves of neural activity. Researchers believe these waves help physically pump cerebrospinal fluid through brain tissue, almost like a slow, rhythmic tide assisting the flow. This means the clearance system is not simply switched on by sleep. It is actively driven by the same brain waves responsible for your deepest rest. The stillness you feel and the invisible pumping happening beneath it are, in effect, the same event, described from 2 different angles. In the deepest part of sleep, your breathing becomes much slower and heavier. You are witnessing something connected to more than just relaxation. Researchers have found that the rhythm of breathing itself may help drive cerebrospinal fluid movement through the brain. Each slow breath creates small pressure changes that assist fluid flow through glymphatic channels. Your cardiovascular pulse contributes something similar, its rhythmic pressure waves nudging fluid along its path. Two systems you never consciously direct, breath and heartbeat, quietly cooperate each night to move fluid through spaces you will never feel. What seems automatic and simple is, underneath, remarkably coordinated. There is something almost startling about learning that your brain shrinks itself on purpose, and yet that is precisely what deep sleep requires of your glial cells. To understand why, it helps to picture brain tissue during the day as a tightly packed city, every space accounted for, little room to move. At night, that city loosens. Glial cells, especially a subtype called astrocytes, contract their own volume, and the previously narrow gaps between cells widen enough for fluid to pass freely. This is not injury or shrinkage from stress. It is a controlled, reversible adjustment, undone again each morning as you wake and the spaces narrow back to their daytime density. Wake from a long, deep sleep, and something intangible seems to have shifted overnight, even if you cannot name what. Part of what shifted was measurable. Studies tracking glymphatic activity found that clearance is not constant through the night. It peaks during the deeper stages of non-REM sleep, typically occurring in longer stretches during the first half of a full night's rest. This is one reason early sleep carries a particular weight. Much of your brain's most active clearance work is already underway before you reach the later, lighter stages of the night. What feels like the middle of sleep may actually be the busiest hour your brain experiences all day. It is tempting to push through exhaustion, telling yourself you will catch up on rest later. But that is a promise your brain cannot fully keep. Naps and short rest periods, however calming, generally do not reach the sustained deep sleep stages required for meaningful glymphatic clearance. Research suggests the process needs uninterrupted time in slow-wave sleep to build momentum, and brief rest rarely provides that. This does not mean naps are without value, but they are not a substitute for the specific kind of sleep your brain's waste clearance system depends on. Some kinds of rest restore your energy. Only one kind restores your brain at the cellular level. Many people carry a particular kind of guilt about sleeping too much, as though extra hours were indulgence rather than necessity. But research into glymphatic function suggests the opposite may often be true. The process itself may simply take the time it takes. Studies show that clearance efficiency continues to build across a full night's sleep cycle, with cumulative benefits tied to total time spent in deep sleep stages. Cutting a night short does not just remove hours from a schedule. It removes rounds of clearance your brain was still in the middle of performing. What looked like laziness from the outside may have been your body finishing something it had already started. The deepest part of sleep can feel less like resting and more like disappearing, a stretch of time your conscious mind simply cannot account for afterward. That disappearance is exactly when your brain is doing its heaviest lifting. Right now, in the part of the night this stretch of facts has been describing, the glial cells lining your brain's passageways are pulling back, making room. Cerebrospinal fluid is already tracing the paths those cells open for it, carried along by your own slow breath and your own unhurried pulse, asking nothing further from you than staying asleep. You don't have to check whether it's working. The tightness that gathers behind your eyes after a long day is exactly the kind of residue this quiet tide was built to carry off, and it is already partway gone. What hasn't been answered yet is what becomes of that particular protein once it finally leaves. That is where the next stretch of this begins. some people feel strangely protective of their sleep, resistant to anyone interrupting it, even for something minor. That instinct may be more justified than you realized. Once cerebrospinal fluid collects waste from around your neurons, that fluid must travel a specific distance before the process finishes. It does not clear instantly the moment you close your eyes. Researchers estimate that meaningful glymphatic clearance requires sustained hours of deep sleep, not brief dips into it. Waking partway through disrupts fluid still mid-journey through your brain's drainage channels. The irritation you feel at being woken too early is not simply preference. It may be your body registering that something essential was cut off before completion. So many people describe their clearest thinking as happening first thing in the morning, before the day has added anything new to process. There is a reason. By morning, after a full cycle of deep sleep, glymphatic clearance has typically completed several rounds of removing metabolic waste from brain tissue accumulated the previous day. Your brain, in a very real sense, starts each morning closer to a blank page than it ended the night before. This is not simply a feeling of freshness. It corresponds to a measurable reduction in the buildup that had gathered by the time you went to bed. The clarity was earned, hour by hour, while you were unconscious of it happening. Aging seems to bring lighter, more fragmented sleep, even in people who once slept easily their whole lives. Research suggests glymphatic function naturally slows with age, and studies have found reduced clearance efficiency in older brains compared to younger ones. Scientists believe this may be connected to why aging is associated with a gradual buildup of certain proteins in some individuals. The system does not stop working. It simply becomes less efficient, needing more time or deeper sleep to accomplish what it once did more easily. This is one reason researchers increasingly view consistent, quality sleep as something that matters more, not less, as the years accumulate. After a poor night's sleep, you can feel oddly emotional, small frustrations swelling into something larger than they should be. There may be a physical thread running underneath that feeling. Some researchers studying glymphatic function have proposed that inefficient waste clearance, sustained over time, may affect regions of the brain involved in mood and emotional regulation, alongside memory and cognitive clarity. The science here is still developing, and no single night explains a mood entirely. But the pattern holds enough weight that sleep researchers now treat emotional steadiness as something connected to brain maintenance, not separate from it. What felt like an overreaction may have partly been an undercleaned brain asking for what it didn't get. The pattern is settled by now, one worth naming plainly. Nothing described so far has been about your brain resting in the sense of doing less. Every mechanism, the shrinking cells, the directed fluid, the breath-driven rhythm, describes a brain doing something it can only do when you stop asking anything else of it. The question of how much work your body performs while you seem to be doing nothing is starting to answer itself, and the answer is not modest. But clearance is only one shift in a longer night. What hasn't been touched yet is what your body builds while it clears, the repair work running in parallel, the part of the night where growth, not just removal, becomes the story. That building begins in what comes next. Somewhere behind your closed eyes right now, that sane tide is still moving, unhurried, unbothered by whether you're tracking it. You don't have to do anything to keep it going. It was never waiting on your attention in the first place. Feel how your breath has already slowed since the last few minutes, each one a little longer than the one before it. And know that slowing is not incidental. It's the same rhythm quietly helping carry things out of the spaces it's passing through. There's nothing left for you to manage here. Let your shoulders sink a little further into wherever you're resting. The clearing continues whether you notice it or not, and what it uncovers next is simply waiting for you to arrive there, unrushed. Sleep well tonight, knowing this hour of facts is only one small piece of a much larger story your body tells itself over and over every night, whether or not you ever hear it. If any of this has helped your mind settle, letting it keep you company again tomorrow night costs nothing but a quiet tap on subscribe, no urgency to it, just a door left open for whenever you need somewhere soft to land. And if this particular hour gave you something to rest inside of, passing it along costs the listener nothing either, just a way of leaving a light on for somebody else's tired mind. Either way, you're welcome to stay right here, exactly as long as you need. There is a version of you that only exists for a few hours each night, one where growth and repair take priority over everything else your body could be doing. Researchers have long noted that this version emerges during the deepest stage of sleep, the slow wave stage that dominates the first part of the night. It is not a passive stillness. It is a scheduled takeover, where the systems that build and mend tissue are handed the controls precisely when your conscious mind steps back. You do not decide when this shift begins. Your architecture decides it for you, tied to how deep the sleep gets, not how long you've been lying still. What feels like disappearing into rest is really you handing the night over to the part of your body that knows how to rebuild it. A single rough night of sleep can leave you feeling like your body simply did not get around to repairing itself. Endocrinology explains this almost literally. The pituitary gland releases the bulk of the day's growth hormone in pulses tied to slow-wave sleep, with the largest pulse typically arriving in the first sleep cycle. This hormone drives tissue repair, muscle recovery, and cellular renewal throughout the body, and its release is far lower during wakefulness. When slow-wave sleep is cut short, that pulse can be blunted, not just delayed. The body does not simply catch up the next day. It was counting on that specific window, and when the window shrinks, so does the work that gets done inside it. Children falling asleep mid-sentence, adults describing a workout that feels healed overnight, these moments point to something the body has quietly known before science named it. Growth hormone is not only about childhood growth in adults, it governs the ongoing maintenance of muscle, bone, and connective tissue. Its nighttime release follows a distinct pattern from daytime hormone activity, arriving in bursts tied to deep sleep rather than a steady trickle. Researchers describe this as a pulsatile rhythm, separate from stress-driven hormone release. Whatever ache you carried into bed is met, at least in part, by a chemical signal your body only sends once you've gone still enough, long enough, for it to arrive. It can feel indulgent to imagine your body doing anything but resting while you sleep, as though rebuilding tissue should require your attention to happen at all. But the growth hormone pulse, tied to slow-wave sleep, operates independently of anything you consciously do. It is triggered by brainwave patterns, not intention. Studies tracking hormone levels across the night show this pulse rising sharply within the first 90 minutes of sleep, then tapering as the night continues and lighter sleep stages take over. This is not effort. It is a scheduled biological event, arriving on time whether or not you believe you have earned it. The repair was never waiting for your permission, only for your stillness. There is a chemical constancy to certain nights that feels almost protective, like something keeping watch while your guard is down. Melatonin, the hormone most associated with sleep timing, does more than signal darkness to the brain. Research has documented its role as a potent antioxidant, capable of neutralizing free radicals and supporting cellular repair processes throughout the body, not only in the brain. Its levels rise in the evening as light fades and fall again near morning, tracking almost exactly with the hours you are least active and most vulnerable. The same hormone that eases you into sleep is quietly working as a kind of nightly maintenance crew for the cells carrying you through the day. Darkness itself seems to invite a different kind of stillness than simply closing your eyes in a lit room. This is not imagined. Melatonin production is directly suppressed by light exposure, particularly the blue wavelengths common in evening screens, and its release depends on the pineal gland reading the absence of light as a cue. Once darkness sets in, melatonin rises steadily, peaking in the middle of the night before tapering toward morning. This rhythm has been documented consistently across decades of sleep research. The dark was never just the backdrop for sleep. It is the signal that authorizes your body's overnight repair chemistry to begin. There is a specific relief in finally going still after a day of being needed by everyone and everything, as if your body had been holding its breath until permission arrived. Cortisol, often called the stress hormone, follows a rhythm that supports exactly this feeling. Under normal conditions, cortisol levels drop to their lowest point in the first half of the night, reaching what researchers call the cortisol nadir, typically a few hours after sleep onset. This dip is not incidental. It creates a hormonal environment low in stress signaling, allowing repair-oriented hormones like growth hormone room to dominate. Your body was not simply tolerating the day's demands until sleep. It was waiting for the moment cortisol would finally step back and let something gentler take over. Waking a few hours before your alarm with a strange, alert clarity is a common enough experience that many assume it means something has gone wrong. Often, it has not. Cortisol begins rising again in the second half of the night, part of a well-documented circadian pattern that prepares the body for waking hours before you actually open your eyes. This rise is gradual and, in a healthy rhythm, peaks shortly after natural waking, a pattern researchers call the cortisol awakening response. It is not stress arriving early. It is your body quietly rehearsing alertness in advance, so that by the time you are expected to function, the biological groundwork has already been laid. It is easy to think of hormones as reacting to your day rather than following their own timeline, but the cortisol rhythm reveals something more deliberate. Research shows this rhythm is generated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain's master circadian clock, largely independent of what actually happens to you during waking hours. Even on days with little stress, cortisol still falls at night and rises toward morning because the rhythm is anticipatory rather than purely reactive. Disruption to this pattern, from irregular sleep or shift work, has been linked in multiple studies to altered metabolic and immune markers. Your stress hormone was never only about stress. It was always, in part, about time. There is a kind of nighttime tenderness in the body that rarely gets named, one tied to hormones most people only associate with new parents. Prolactin, best known for its role in lactation, also rises during sleep in people regardless of reproductive status, with levels peaking during the nighttime hours in coordination with slow-wave sleep. Research has linked prolactin to immune regulation and a calming, sleep-supportive effect on the nervous system. Its rise at night is not incidental to sleep. Some studies suggest it may help reinforce the deep sleep stages that support it. The body, it seems, has more than one way of holding itself gently through the dark, and this is one of the quieter ones. It can feel strange to imagine that hormones tied to reproduction and vitality follow the same nighttime rhythm as repair and rest, as though the body kept every kind of renewal on one shared schedule. In men, Testosterone follows a clear circadian pattern, with levels rising overnight and peaking around the time of waking, closely tied to sleep quality and duration, rather than time of day alone. Studies restricting sleep to 5 hours a night for even 1 week have shown measurable drops in daytime testosterone levels in young, healthy men. The hormone most associated with vigor and drive is, in part, manufactured in the dark, built during the same hours the rest of the body is quietly being repaired. The overnight hormonal system can feel less like separate chemicals doing separate jobs and more like something coordinated, almost musical, in how precisely it times itself to darkness and depth of sleep. Researchers studying the endocrine system describe this coordination as an orchestration between the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and peripheral organs, each releasing its signal at a specific sleep stage rather than at random. Growth hormone arrives with the deepest slow-wave sleep, cortisol falls and rises across the whole night, melatonin rises with darkness, and prolactin peaks alongside deep sleep. None of it happens by accident, and none of it happens without you being still long enough for the coordination to unfold in full. There is a particular kind of frustration in feeling like a short night of sleep should not matter much, only to notice the next day feels quietly harder than it should. The hormonal night shift explains part of why. Because growth hormone, cortisol regulation, melatonin, and prolactin are all tied to specific sleep stages rather than simply hours logged, cutting sleep short does not just remove time, it removes entire phases where these hormones are meant to peak. Studies on partial sleep restriction have shown disrupted growth hormone pulses and blunted overnight melatonin exposure after just one shortened night. The body was not simply asked to do less that night, it was asked to skip an entire shift of work it had already scheduled. The rhythm settling through you right now is not separate from what's just been described. The same falling and rising this hour keeps tracing is moving through your own chemistry at this moment, whether or not you're following the details. Let your breath slow one notch further. Nothing here is asking you to keep track of it. We'll keep moving with it, gently. One bad night of sleep seems to cost more than the hours actually lost. The endocrine research offers something close to an explanation. Because these hormonal processes depend on reaching and sustaining certain sleep stages, not just falling asleep, a night interrupted by frequent waking can suppress the same repair signals as a night cut short entirely. Research on fragmented sleep has linked this pattern to reduced growth hormone secretion and altered cortisol rhythms even when total sleep time looks adequate on paper. It was never only about how long you were asleep. It was about whether your body was given the uninterrupted depth it needed to complete the shift it had already begun. What becomes clear, watching these systems together, is that the body treats darkness less like an absence of light and more like an appointment. It is kept every night of your life without being asked. Growth hormone does not arrive because you deserve rest. It arrives because slow-wave sleep opened the door for it. Cortisol does not fall because the day was easy. It falls because the clock inside you says it is time. The question of how much work your body does while you do nothing is starting to answer itself. It runs an entire hormonal shift, time to darkness with more precision than most waking schedules ever manage, asking nothing from you but the stillness to let it finish. A hard day leaves your body feeling like it needs to be rebuilt, not just rested, because in a very literal sense, it does. Protein synthesis, the process your cells use to build and repair tissue, rises during sleep and reaches its highest rate while you are in the deepest stages of the night. Growth hormone surges, blood flow shifts toward muscle and connective tissue, and the raw materials your day used up begin getting replaced. This is not general recovery. It is targeted construction, aimed at the exact fibers that worked hardest while you were awake. The tired you feel by evening was never the end of the story. It was the order form for what your body builds while you're gone. Every day, without you noticing, your muscles collect small tears, microscopic damage from ordinary movement, not injury, just the wearer being used. You were never meant to walk around noticing this, and mostly you don't. What you feel instead is a certain heaviness, a pull in the legs or shoulders that seems to have no clear cause. Sleep is when those micro tears get identified and patched fiber by fiber, using the protein your body was quietly stockpiling all day. Satellite cells, the body's dedicated repair workers for muscle, activate most heavily during deep sleep, fusing to damaged fibers and rebuilding them stronger than before. The soreness was never a problem to solve. It was a to-do list, already scheduled for completion overnight. The phrase "beauty sleep" sounds like something people say to make rest sound worthwhile. But the underlying mechanism is real and specific. Collagen, the structural protein that keeps skin firm and elastic, is produced at higher rates during deep sleep, while cortisol, the hormone that breaks collagen down, drops to its lowest levels of the day. This means nighttime is not neutral for your skin. It is the one stretch of the 24 hours when building outweighs breaking. Blood flow to the skin increases as you sleep, delivering the materials collagen production requires. What looked like a folk saying turns out to describe an actual shift in your body's chemistry, time to arrive only when you finally stop moving. Bones seem like the most permanent part of you, fixed, solid, unchanging, but they are quietly being dismantled and rebuilt on a schedule most people never learn. This process, called bone remodeling, involves two types of specialized cells, one that tears away old or damaged bone tissue, and another that lays down new material in its place. Both operate on a circadian rhythm, and their most active window falls overnight, while you are still and your body is not competing for resources with movement or digestion. The bones holding you up tomorrow are not identical to the ones holding you up today. Something in you is always being replaced, always being renewed, and it asks nothing from you but the stillness to let it happen. There is a particular kind of relief in finally lying down after using your body all day, even before you fall asleep, as if some part of you already knows what is about to start. Skin cells divide and replace themselves at a measurably faster rate during the night than during the day, a finding researchers have linked to the same circadian signals that govern your sleep-wake cycle. Your body appears to have decided, over evolutionary time, that cell division is safer and more efficient when you are still, no ultraviolet exposure, no friction, no competing demands for energy. That sense of rightness in lying down is not imagined. It is your body, recognizing the conditions it was built to renew itself in, finally arriving. A cut or scrape seems to close up faster after a good night's sleep than after a restless one. You are noticing something science has since confirmed. Wound healing accelerates measurably during sleep, driven by the same growth hormone surge responsible for muscle and tissue repair elsewhere in the body. Sleep-deprived study participants show slower wound closure and weaker new tissue at the site of injury compared to those who sleep normally. The immune cells responsible for clearing debris from a wound and the fibroblasts responsible for rebuilding tissue both function more efficiently during deep sleep stages. Your body was never healing on faith. It was healing on a schedule, and that schedule needed the dark to run properly. Deep inside nearly every cell in your body are mitochondria, the structures responsible for converting food into usable energy. And like everything else you rely on, they need occasional maintenance to keep functioning well. During sleep, particularly during the deep stages, your cells increase the production of proteins that repair damaged mitochondria and support the creation of new ones, a process researchers call mitochondrial biogenesis. This matters because mitochondria degrade with ordinary use, the way any engine does, and a body running on damaged mitochondria simply has less energy available for everything else it needs to do. The fatigue that piles up after several short nights is not only about missing hours. It is about the maintenance shift that never got its turn to run. There is a kind of cleanup your cells perform on themselves, and it has a name that sounds almost too tidy for what it actually does: autophagy, from the Greek for self-eating. During this process, cells identify their own damaged components, misfolded proteins, worn-out structures, defective mitochondria, and break them down to be recycled into usable material. Autophagy increases significantly during sleep and fasting, both conditions where the body is not busy processing new input and can turn its attention inward. What looks like neglect from the outside, a body lying still with nothing visibly happening, is in fact one of its most disciplined forms of self-care. Nothing is wasted. What no longer works is quietly taken apart and returned to raw material for whatever comes next. It can feel like an exaggeration to say a single night of poor sleep affects your entire body at the cellular level, but the research does not support treating it as an exaggeration. One well-known study found that even one night of significant sleep restriction changed the activity of thousands of genes involved in tissue repair, immune response, and cellular stress management. The changes were not permanent, but they were immediate, showing up in blood samples taken the very next morning. Your cells are listening to how much rest you give them, adjusting their repair priorities in real time based on what the night actually delivered. The body does not wait for a pattern to form before it responds. It responds to last night, specifically whether or not you noticed. What tonight keeps circling back to is this: the repair happening in your muscles, your skin, your bones, your smallest cells was never something you had to work for by lying still long enough or earning it through exhaustion. It was already the plan, running underneath the tiredness rather than waiting for permission from it. The question shifts here, not whether your body is doing something while you rest, but how much of what you call recovery was actually reconstruction all along, cell by cell, fiber by fiber, without asking you to notice or approve any of it. The part the next stretch follows is quieter still. What happens when this rebuilding is allowed to run without interruption, night after night, instead of being cut short before its work is finished? What you just heard about, the small engines inside your cells being quietly repaired, replaced, kept running without your instruction, is not separate from the tiredness you have carried today. That tiredness was never a failure of effort. It was simply a body waiting for its maintenance shift to begin. You do not have to hold yourself upright for this. You do not have to do anything at all. Feel the weight of your own stillness right now and let it be enough. The next stretch goes deeper into what your body repairs when nothing is asked of it. We continue from exactly here. There is a particular kind of ache that shows up right before you get sick, a heaviness in the limbs, a pull toward the couch, hours before any fever registers. Immunologists call this sickness behavior, and it is not weakness arriving early. It is your body quietly reallocating its energy toward defense, easing you away from movement and toward rest so its resources can go where they are most needed. Signaling molecules called cytokines guide this shift before you consciously notice anything is wrong. The tiredness is not something working against you. It is the first sign that your body has already begun tending to itself, and it wants you horizontal, so the rest of that work can continue undisturbed. A single rough night of sleep leaves you catching every cold that passes through a room for the next week. Research on sleep and immunity backs up that suspicion precisely. During deep sleep, the body ramps up production of T cells, the immune cells responsible for identifying and destroying infected cells directly. Studies tracking sleep-deprived adults found measurably weaker T cell activation compared to well-rested ones, even against the same virus. The room did not get more contagious. Your defense simply had fewer working hands on shift that night, and now you know why. Cytokines have a strange rhythm to them, quiet in daylight hours, rising steadily once the sun goes down. These small proteins act like messengers passed between immune cells, coordinating attacks on pathogens and repairing damaged tissue. Certain cytokines, including interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha, peak specifically during nighttime sleep, particularly in deep slow-wave stages. This is not incidental timing. The body appears to schedule its most demanding immune coordination for the hours when movement, digestion, and higher brain activity are not competing for the same resources it needs to run the defense. Get a vaccine and feel unusually drained that same night, and you have felt something real, not imagined. Sleep researchers have found that people who sleep well in the days surrounding a vaccination develop a stronger, longer-lasting antibody response than those who are sleep-deprived. One well-cited study on hepatitis vaccination showed nearly double the antibody levels in well-rested participants months later. Your immune system was not simply reacting to the shot. It was using sleep as the working conditions it needed to build a memory of the threat that could last for years. There is comfort in learning that getting sick and craving sleep are not two separate problems, but one coordinated response. When the body detects infection, it does not just fight, it renegotiates your entire schedule to make fighting easier. Research on hormones and immunity shows infection increases the drive for slow-wave sleep, specifically the deepest, most restorative stage. Animal studies confirm this extra sleep improves survival rates during illness. Exhaustion that makes you want to cancel everything and lie down is not your body failing you. It is your body making the single best decision available to it. Something quietly remarkable happens to your blood pressure once you fall asleep, something most people never think to check. In healthy sleep, blood pressure typically drops by 10 to 20% compared to waking levels, a pattern doctors call nocturnal dipping. This is not simply relaxation. It is an active, measured recalibration performed by the autonomic nervous system, giving the heart and blood vessels a nightly window of reduced strain. People whose blood pressure fails to dip during sleep face higher long-term cardiovascular risk. The quiet drop each night is one of your heart's most protective habits. A poor night's sleep leaves you reaching for sugary food the next day, even when you had no intention of eating that way. The mechanism behind that craving has a name: leptin and ghrelin, the two hormones that tell your brain when you are full and when you are hungry. Sleep deprivation studies show leptin, the fullness hormone, drops while ghrelin, the hunger hormone, rises after just one restricted night. Your willpower was never the issue. Your appetite signals were recalibrated by exhaustion before you ever opened the refrigerator. There is a reason nutritionists increasingly ask about sleep before they ask about diet, and it comes down to a hormone most people have never heard named. Ghrelin does more than announce hunger. It specifically increases cravings for calorie-dense, carbohydrate-heavy food, the exact foods that feel most tempting during a tired afternoon. Research tracking sleep-restricted adults consistently finds they eat more than their well-rested selves, largely from snack foods. The extra hunger was never about a weak will. It was a hormone doing precisely what sleep loss primes it to do. Your body treats glucose differently, depending on how well you slept the night before, in ways you would never feel directly, but that show up clearly in blood tests. During healthy sleep, insulin sensitivity, how efficiently your cells respond to insulin signal to absorb glucose, stays relatively stable overnight. Just a few nights of restricted sleep can meaningfully reduce insulin sensitivity. A shift research links to patterns seen in early-stage prediabetes. This is not a permanent verdict on your health. It is a reversible signal that your metabolic system depends on rest to function properly. The liver does not close for the night, the way the rest of your conscious mind seems to. It shifts into a different mode of work entirely once sleep begins, one built around processing rather than digesting. During sleep, the liver focuses heavily on metabolizing toxins, regulating blood sugar storage, and clearing byproducts your body accumulated during the day, work that competes less with digestion once you stop eating. Studies on shift workers with disrupted sleep show elevated liver stress markers over time. The organ was never resting. It was simply given the space to finally catch up. Something in your gut is listening to your sleep schedule far more closely than you would expect, and it responds by changing its own population overnight. The trillions of bacteria living in your intestines, collectively called the gut microbiome, follow a daily rhythm influenced heavily by sleep timing. Research shows that even 2 nights of disrupted sleep can shift the balance of gut bacteria towards species linked with inflammation and weight gain. The repair happening in your gut while you sleep is not just tissue healing. It is an entire ecosystem inside you, resetting itself toward balance. Inflammation gets talked about like an enemy, but really it is a normal, necessary process your body needs to heal injuries and fight infection. The problem is not inflammation itself. It is inflammation that never turns off. Sleep plays a direct role in regulating that shutoff switch. Deep sleep specifically triggers a decrease in circulating inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, allowing the immune system to stand down once a threat passes. People with chronic sleep restriction show persistently elevated inflammation markers, even without any active infection. The nightly repair shift includes learning when the fight is over. There is a version of aging that has less to do with years passing and more to do with an immune system that never fully calms down, a phenomenon researchers now call inflammaging. Chronic, low-grade inflammation, worsened by poor sleep, is linked to accelerated cellular aging. Studies comparing older adults with strong sleep habits to those with fragmented sleep show measurably lower inflammatory markers in the good sleepers. The good news runs the same direction. The nightly quieting of inflammation is one of the most accessible ways to protect the years still ahead of you, and it asks nothing but sleep. Your heart gets a kind of vacation every night that has nothing to do with beating slower out of boredom. During deep, non-REM sleep, heart rate drops, blood pressure dips, and the workload on your cardiovascular system decreases measurably compared to waking hours. Cardiologists refer to this as the heart's recovery window. Research consistently links steady, sufficient sleep to healthier hearts over time, and the reverse loop is reassuring too. The heart does not require you to exercise it into rest. It only requires that you actually give it the unbroken hours it has been designed to recover in. What has quietly been forming across everything described so far is not a list of separate systems, each doing their own small job. It is one coordinated shift, immune cells rising to meet threats, hormones renegotiating hunger, blood pressure easing its grip, the liver and gut resetting their own balance, all timed to the same nightly window. The question of how much work your body performs while appearing to do nothing has been answering itself, one system at a time. What remains is seeing how completely these separate repairs depend on each other to finish their work. People who sleep poorly for long stretches often seem to catch every illness that circulates nearby, not just occasionally, but almost as a pattern. That pattern has a measurable basis. Longitudinal studies tracking sleep duration and illness. Incidents found that adults sleeping fewer than 6 hours a night were roughly 4 times more likely to develop a common cold after viral exposure than those sleeping 7 hours or more. The immune system was never simply unlucky in those cases. It was working with a fraction of the nightly preparation time it depends on. There is a particular kind of steadiness some people carry that seems to have little to do with diet or willpower, and everything to do with a habit most people overlook entirely. Consistent, sufficient sleep appears to stabilize the hormonal rhythm governing appetite far more reliably than any single meal choice. Research following people who improved sleep duration alone, without changing food intake, found natural reductions in calorie consumption and improved hunger regulation within weeks. The body was not being disciplined into balance. It was simply given back a nightly signal it needed to regulate itself. Something remarkable happens to the relationship between glucose and sleep. Once researchers looked closely enough to notice it, the two regulate each other in both directions, not just one. Poor sleep raises blood sugar and reduces insulin sensitivity, and elevated blood sugar in turn disrupts the deep sleep stages needed to correct it, creating a cycle that can either spiral downward or stabilize itself. Studies on pre-diabetic adults who improved sleep quality alone showed measurable improvements in fasting glucose within a few weeks. The body was never asking you to fix everything at once. Sleep alone was enough to start correcting the loop. Your immune system keeps a kind of memory that gets built almost entirely while you are unconscious, a fact that surprises most people the first time they hear it. Memory T cells, the cells responsible for recognizing a pathogen faster the second time it appears, consolidate most effectively during slow-wave sleep, according to immunological research on vaccine response and infection recovery. This is why illness recovery slows so noticeably during periods of disrupted sleep. The body is not just fighting the current threat, it is trying and struggling to file away what it learned the next time. Insomnia takes something quietly beyond simple tiredness. It can loosen the nightly repair window that so many systems lean on. Chronic insomnia has been associated in large studies with strain on metabolic and cardiovascular health, largely because it removes the reset each system depends on. But the same research carries a steadying message. This is a window that reopens. Restoring sleep restores the repair, and the systems that were waiting quietly resume their work the moment the depth returns. The frustration of a sleepless night points in the end towards something recoverable, not fixed. The way blood pressure behaves during sleep can reveal how well the body is recovering, often long before anything else would show it. Nocturnal blood pressure dipping, that natural nightly drop, is one of the clearest signs cardiologists watch for a well-rested cardiovascular system. When the dip is present, it reflects a heart getting the recovery window it was built for. And because this pattern responds to sleep itself, it is one of the more encouraging measures a person can influence simply by protecting their nights. The dip is not decorative. It is a quiet readout of a system being allowed to rest. There is a reason shift workers whose sleep schedules fight against the body's natural rhythm show consistently higher rates of metabolic and immune-related illness across large population studies. Disrupting the timing of sleep, not just the duration, appears to interfere with when cytokines release, when insulin sensitivity peaks, and when blood pressure is supposed to dip. Research on rotating shift nurses found elevated markers of inflammation and insulin resistance compared to daytime-only workers with similar sleep totals. The body does not just need enough sleep. It needs that sleep to arrive when its internal clock expects it. What has been happening across every fact in this stretch is not a group of separate repairs running in parallel by coincidence. Immune defense, appetite regulation, blood sugar control, cardiovascular rest, all of them lean on the same nightly window, timed by the same internal clock, drawing from the same uninterrupted hours. None of these systems asked to be understood individually. They were always one shift, running under a single name most people never learn to give it. The night shift your body works while you believe you are doing nothing at all. If there is one thread running under everything covered so far, it is this. None of these repairs required belief, effort, or permission from you to begin. The T cells did not wait for confidence. The liver did not wait for gratitude. Blood pressure did not wait for the day to feel resolved. Each system simply began its part of the work the moment stillness allowed it to, following a schedule written into biology long before anyone explained it to you. The repair was never something you had to deserve. It was already running night after night, regardless of how the day went. Here is what tonight has been building toward, stated plainly. While you rest, your body is not idle. It is running its most important repair shift, clearing waste from the brain through the glymphatic system, releasing growth hormone to rebuild tissue, and coordinating immune and metabolic repair through the very systems just described. This is not metaphor. It is measurable biology, confirmed across decades of research, happening on a schedule that does not require your effort, your attention, or your permission. The stillness you feel at night is not absence. It is the most productive shift your body performs all day. The liver does not check whether today was hard enough to deserve this. It simply keeps clearing, the way a slow tide keeps returning to the same shore without being asked twice. Right now, somewhere beneath your thinking, that clearing is already moving through you. Blood pressure easing its grip, hunger and fullness quietly renegotiating their old argument. Immune cells filing away what they learned tonight for the next time they need it. None of it is waiting on your effort. You do not have to help it find the way. What comes next only carries this same work into its final, plainest shape. There is a particular kind of relief that comes the morning after a hard day finally makes sense, as if some quiet clerk sorted through what happened while you slept. That sorting is not a metaphor. During deep sleep, the hippocampus replays the day's events and gradually hands the important ones to the cortex for long-term storage. What you needed to keep gets filed. What you didn't gets allowed to fade. You didn't have to decide which was which. A worry feels sharper at midnight and softer by morning without you doing anything to change it. That shift has a mechanism. Sleep does not simply store memories, it edits them, often stripping the emotional sting from an experience while keeping the facts intact. The event stays. The ache around it quietly loosens. Nothing about what happened to you was erased, only the part that hurt to carry. Somewhere in the night, a memory you didn't consciously choose gets replayed at high speed, faster than it could ever happen while you were awake. Researchers have recorded this compressed replay in the hippocampus, sequences of the day firing back in fast forward as the brain rehearses what mattered. This is how a single afternoon becomes something you can recall years later. Your body was taking notes long after you stopped paying attention. There is a reason a difficult memory can feel almost unbearable the night it happens and merely sad a month later. Sleep researchers call this process emotional memory. Consolidation. and it depends heavily on REM sleep, the stage where dreaming is most vivid. The brain reactivates the memory without the same flood of stress chemicals that came with the original moment. You get to keep the meaning without reliving the full weight of it. A problem that seemed unsolvable at night quietly resolves itself by the time you wake. This is not superstition. It is the brain continuing to work on unfinished emotional business while the thinking mind rests. During REM sleep, the brain connects distant ideas and feelings in ways it rarely does while awake, arriving at insight without asking your permission. Sleep was never idle. It was doing the very thing you couldn't force. Somewhere tonight, connections in your brain that you no longer need are being quietly removed, not out of neglect, but as an act of care. Scientists call this synaptic pruning, part of a nightly process that trims weak or unused connections between neurons, so the strong ones can function more clearly. Your mind is not accumulating clutter forever. Sleep is where it makes room, so tomorrow you can think without wading through yesterday. After enough sleepless nights, even simple thoughts start to feel foggy, tangled, harder to hold. Neuroscientists describe this as a loss of synaptic homeostasis. Without sleep, the brain's connections grow overloaded, and clarity becomes harder to reach. Sleep is what resets that balance, weakening the unnecessary and strengthening the essential. What felt unclear was never a failure of your mind. It was a mind waiting for its nightly reset. You may have felt your own heartbeat slow as you drift towards sleep, as if your whole body were finally allowed to exhale. That slowing is real and measurable. During deep sleep, the heart settles into a lower resting rate for hours at a time, a pace it never reaches during waking life. This nightly slowdown is linked to lower long-term risk for the heart. Your heart was never just keeping time, it was resting exactly when you needed it to. There is a particular stillness in deep sleep that feels almost like suspension, as if even your blood had slowed its pace. In a sense, it has. During this stage, the blood vessels themselves relax and widen, easing the pressure they carry and reducing the force the heart must push against. This softening of vascular tone is a separate mechanism from the slowing heartbeat, and it is one reason consistent sleep is tied to healthier blood pressure over time. Even your vessels were waiting for permission to loosen their grip. After a full night of rest, you feel lighter in the chest, though nothing about your body changed in an obvious way. Something did change, and it is something you can feel rather than measure. With the heart slowed and the vessels relaxed together, the entire cardiovascular system spends hours under less strain than it ever carries by day. That subjective lightness, the sense of an easier breath, a looser chest, is the felt trace of that reduced load. It was not imagined. It was your body reporting the rest it just received. It can feel strange that the body seems to know exactly when to slow certain systems and quicken others through the night, as if something were conducting from behind the scenes. Something is. The autonomic nervous system shifts its balance across the night, easing the heart and vessels during deep sleep, then adjusting again as REM approaches. Nothing about this coordination requires your attention. Your body has been keeping this rhythm since before you can remember. There's a specific comfort in realizing your body doesn't do one repair at a time, waiting patiently for its turn. It runs many at once. While the brain consolidates memory, the heart rests, tissues rebuild, and the immune system patrols, all overlapping or coordinated by the same internal clock. Nothing here competes for your attention because none of it needs it. The whole system moves together like a crew that already knows its schedule by heart. So many separate repairs manage to happen in the right order every single night without you supervising any of it. The answer lives in your circadian rhythm, a master clock in the brain that times each repair process to the stage of sleep best suited for it. Deep sleep for the body, REM for the mind, each phase arriving exactly when its particular work is ready to begin. You were never meant to manage this. You were only ever meant to lie still and let it run. There is something almost startling about how little your body asks of you to do all of this. No instruction, no effort, no conscious decision to consolidate a memory or slow a heartbeat. Sleep researchers describe the body during rest as remarkably self-directed, running dozens of interdependent repair processes using only the conditions you provide: darkness, stillness, and time. You were never the one doing the work. You were only ever the one making space for it. What tonight has been quietly proving, system by system, is this: the body was never waiting for you to earn its care before offering it. The glymphatic fluid that clears without asking, the growth hormone that rebuilds without conditions, the memories sorted and the heart eased and the mind pruned back to clarity, none of it required permission and none of it kept score. What still remains is the simplest part of the answer, the part that isn't about mechanisms at all. What all of this quiet, coordinated care actually means for the person receiving it, night after night, whether or not they ever noticed. There is a kind of trust your body places in stillness that you may never have thought to name. Every system tonight, memory, heart, immunity, mind, waited only for you to stop moving, not for you to prove anything first. That trust runs both directions. Your body holds up its end of the work every night, whether you rested well the night before or not. It has never once required a reason. It only ever required stillness. You may have spent years treating a quiet evening as time you had to justify, something you owed an explanation for. Nothing in your body has ever asked for one. Every repair described tonight, from clearing waste to steadying your heart to filing memories where they belong, runs on the same simple condition: that you allow it to happen. Justification was never part of the arrangement. Only permission was. Picture your own hands in the morning. Uncurling from the fist, sleep sometimes leaves them in. The skin along your knuckles is a little smoother than it was last night, the small repairs already made. This is the shape gratitude can take once you understand what the dark has been doing, not a thought, but a body that arrives at morning quietly mended. No part of it asked to be noticed. It simply continued, the way it always has. You have likely never once had to remind your body to begin any of tonight's work. Not the clearing, not the rebuilding, not the sorting of memory. It simply knows. This is what researchers mean when they describe the body as homeostatic, always working quietly to return itself to balance, using rest as its primary tool. You were never required to manage this system. You were only ever invited to stop interfering with it. There is something almost tender about how completely your body commits to this nightly work, without conditions, without hesitation, every single time you lie down. It does not wait to see if today was hard enough to deserve care. It does not measure whether you were productive enough to earn rest. It simply begins, the same way it always has, because repair was never a reward. It was always simply what happens next. Imagine tomorrow's first breath before you are even awake to take it, slower, fuller, drawn by a body that spent the night setting itself right. You may remember none of the work, and that has always been the plan. The memories were sorted, the heart was eased, the mind was cleared, all while you were somewhere else entirely. What you carry forward is not the memory of the process, but its result, waiting in your chest before you open your eyes. Think of the light in the room the moment you wake from a night like this, softer somehow, as though the morning itself is easier to meet. That difference is not chance. It is the visible trace of a full night's repair, completing on schedule, memory sorted, tissue rebuilt, heart rested, mind cleared. You feel the result without ever needing to understand the process. The body finished its shift, and morning is simply what that finishing feels like. You do not have to understand any of tonight's systems for them to keep working on your behalf, tonight and every night after. The body has never required comprehension as a condition of its care. It repairs the sleeping and the waking, the grateful and the unaware, in exactly the same measure. What you now know does not change what it will do tonight. It only changes how you might finally let it. There is a stillness that settles once you stop treating rest as something to justify and simply let it be what it has always been, necessary. Every system tonight has said the same thing in a different language. You do not have to earn this. The body has never once withheld its care while waiting for you to prove you deserved it, and it will not begin tonight. Rest was never the opposite of doing something. It was always the doing, quiet, unseen, and complete, whether or not you ever noticed it happening. What looked like doing nothing was, the whole time, the doing itself. You do not have to work to be worthy of this stillness, and you never did. You only have to lie here and let it hold you the way it always has, the way it always will, long after this thought is gone. There was a question underneath tonight that never announced itself. When you are doing nothing, how much work is your body actually doing? By now, the answer has stopped being a fact you understand and started being something you simply feel, in the ease behind your ribs, in a mind that has already begun sorting itself without you. The body was never waiting for you to earn this care first. It runs the same quiet shift whether you noticed or not, whether you thanked it or not, because repair was never a reward for the day. It was only ever what comes next, the moment you finally stop insisting on being useful. You don't have to carry anything else out of tonight except this. The stillness you're in right now is already doing something. Let that be enough. Let your body keep the rest of the work. It was never yours to finish. Picture the quiet after a house finally empties for the night. The kind of quiet that isn't absence, but relief. Somewhere behind your closed eyes, that same quiet is moving through you now, sorting, easing, settling, asking nothing of you in return. Let your body dissolve into that particular hush, the one that only arrives once trying has stopped. There was never a condition on this rest, and there still isn't. Let it hold you all the way down,